before starting this, I would like to tell you all that we are going to provide all of you the certificates for attending this webinar. But yes, for this, you will have to stay with us for the entire webinar. So please feel connected and keep on participating in the chat box. Okay, so let's get it started. But before that, I would like to ask you something. There is a question which is coming to my mind, which I would like to ask you all. So let's imagine that there is a room in which there is an electric bulb, and that electric bulb has its switch outside it. However, there are two more switches outside the room. The room has a door, but no window. So you have to enter the room only once and find out which switch belongs to the electric bulb. How would you do it? Let me know your answers in the chat box. Let's try to make it quick so that we can get it started with the webinar. Okay, that's a nice strategy. Sure, I can repeat the question. So there is a room in which you have an electric bulb and you have three switches outside the room. You have to just enter once and find out which switch belongs to the electric switch. Hello. Okay, fine. Let me now reveal the answer. So what will happen in this case, that you switch on one and then wait for some while. Then you switch it off and you switch on the second switch and you enter the room. Now, what will happen when you go to the room? If the first switch which you switched on would make the electric bulb a little hot, and if the second switch was there, the real switch for the electric bulb, it will enlighten the bulb. But if the third one, then it's not going to nothing is going to happen for the bulb. So did you see that you had only limited chance to go to the room and you had to find, for which you had to have the knowledge that the electric bulb makes the bulb hot, and there are some other knowledge that you require. The same case, you require the knowledge, your expertise when you work remotely, because you have limited time to interact with the team. You have limited opportunity to interact with the team. And that's the same thing which we are going to help us know more about in the webinar today. So it's all about project management in hybrid and remote working. And I'm sure you're going to make the most of it by attending this webinar throughout. Let's welcome Mr. Yasas, who is going to help us to know more about it with his expertise and knowledge in project management. I'm sure you're going to have the best time with the expertise that he has, because he has a lot of knowledge of lecturing, participating in a lot of activities of speaking, public speaking, and then he has a great knowledge about project management. So all the best to learn more about him. And let me introduce now Mr. Yasas so that he can start talking about it and helping us know more. Thank you so much. Please, Mr. Yasas, please help us know more about project management.
Okay, thank you very much, Priyadarshini, and very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you're connecting from. So it's a pleasure for me to talk about this subject, because I would say it's a subject that's very relevant. Of course, project management and related subjects are discussed most of the time, but when it comes to today's world, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone started to work from home, or they were seeing how they can work from home in a remote situation, or it was a hybrid situation. Even now, we know that the world has changed. There are certain companies that has hybrid. That means certain days you work at office, certain days you work from home, or you work virtually. So looking at this, we felt the relevance of talking about project management in remote and hybrid environments, and that's what we are going to talk about. So I hope that I could share some knowledge with you that would be new, that would be refreshing, that would kind of make you think and change the way you work or the way you manage your own teams. So with that, let me dive deep into today's topic. I must say I will start with some of the basics because I personally believe it's quite important for us to know our basics. Brilliance at basics is always important. So bear with me if you already know a bit about projects, project management, or if you're a project manager, bear with me for the first few slides because I'm assuming we have a mass audience here. I can see there are a lot of people who have connected with us, and there might be a varied audience. So there'll be some who have some experience, some who have no experience. So I'll be taking you through certain basics, and then we will go into the deeper topic. So to start this topic, I think the most important thing for us to discuss and know is what is a project. So I know we are not going to have an interactive session right now. So let me, rather than asking you, let me explain it. But in your mind, whenever I ask a question, start thinking about the question. Think about what your answer is, and then let's compare and see how close we are, because there's nothing wrong. Every answer is correct in its own way. And I'm not going to disagree because we all have our own definitions, but I will take certain definitions which are established by the industry, by relevant authorities. So if we ask, what is a project? The first thing that we should think about is a project is a endeavor that we undertake, whether it's to handle a product, whether it is to offer a service, or whether it is results driven. It's a temporary endeavor that we undertake. And in doing this, there's always objectives in place. There are requirements in place, and there are constraints that we have to work with. So if you do see, there's a situation that you're working on a product, a service, or some kind of objective that you're trying to achieve, where there's a clear requirement and there are a set of constraints, then the chances are you are already working on a project. And in doing this, the outcomes are very defined, and there's a particular time period that you're supposed to deliver it. And if you have a team of people who are working with you, handling different tasks and activities, then clearly you are working in a situation of a project. So this definition, which I put in the slides, are actually from the Project Management Institute, which is the main authority when it comes to project management and project management related certifications. If you've heard, there's a certification called PMP, Project Management Professional, which is brought by Project Management Institute. And they have a clear defined body of knowledge, which they call the PMBOK, or the PM, Project Management Body of Knowledge. So if you want to go deeper into this subject, I would strongly advise you to consider the PMBOK, because it is probably the Bible when it comes to project management in this field. So this is what a project is all about. Now, if we want to go a step ahead and understand what is project management, now we know what a project is. Let's go and see what exactly do we mean by managing a project. Oh, by the way, I see there's someone from Zambia. I used to live there some time back as well. So hi to everyone. Yeah, so a project and managing a project. If you use or if you apply your knowledge, your skills, or if you use tools and techniques in terms of meeting the project requirements and managing the project activities, then we can clearly call ourselves that we are managing a particular project. And that is what project management is. So project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, techniques to relevant project activities and meeting project requirements. Once again, this is from the Project Management Institute. This is the clear definition. So what we need to understand is, if you're using a particular knowledge based out of experience over time, if you're using a particular skill set, and today especially I'll be talking about certain tools and techniques, then we can call the activity we are doing as project management. So this is what the definition is. So now we know what a project is, we know what project management is. And let's take another step, because if you remember, when I defined what a project is, I mentioned there are certain constraints that we need to take care of when we manage projects, or in a project there are constraints. So in project management, there are three main constraints that we call the triple constraints, which we need to know and we need to be aware. So let me explain that also before we go into the next section. Okay. So in any project, you would find there's a clearly defined scope. If there's no scope, then you're in trouble because you don't know what the project is about. If I take a basic example of a construction, say you're building a house, that itself is a project, and you know your scope. A scope would be clearly defined as, if you take a construction project and a house, you would say, okay, I need 3 rooms, I need 2 washrooms, I need a sitting room, I need a kitchen, and you have a scope. And within that scope, you will have it clearly defined. You'll have the size, you'll have a diagram, you will say if it's a 2-story house, or so on and so forth. So that's what we mean by a scope. It clearly defines your requirement. Then you would, give me a second, excuse me. Then you would have a clearly defined time frame. So you would want the project to end within a couple of days, weeks, months, or years. If you look at large projects, especially like road construction projects or large buildings, you would see years. Even if you take a software development project, there could be certain projects that could lead into years. So, or even a construction in terms of engineering, like a vehicle. So there's clearly a time frame. Everyone defines a particular time frame. And then you have a budget with regard to the project that you're looking at, which is the cost. So you have a scope, you have a cost, and you have a time. So this is what we talk about when we call or we mention the triple constraints. Now, the problem of the triple constraints is you cannot win by getting the best out of all of this. If during a project you want to change one of these 3 constraints, you are going to compromise 2 other constraints. And let me explain what that is. And if you manage all constraints well, that's when the quality of the project is done in the best possible way. So quality stands in the middle, and you have the triple constraints around. That's why you have this triangle. So if I come back to the example of building a house, because why I'm taking it is because I'm sure all of you are from different industries. There'll be people from construction, software engineering, services, hospitality, and so on and so forth. But if I take a building construction, like a house construction, it's very common to all of us because everyone lives in a particular building. And if you think of that building, and if you're building a new one, you would say, okay, I want this house built in 1 year. And you would have a particular budget, let's say X. And you would say, this is the scope. Now, if you suddenly decide, no, I need to get into this house in 8 months. Now what happens is you're bringing one of the constraints closer than what you suggested, because it was 12 months earlier, and now you're saying you need it in 8 months. Now what happens immediately is you need to put more resources. When you put more resources, whether it's physical resources, whether it's human resources, it adds on to your cost. Right? So your scope would not change, but your time is changing, which means your cost also changes. In the same way, in between of a project, if you say, oh, I want to reduce this price, I want to reduce the cost by 10%. Immediately what happens is when you reduce the cost, either you need to change your scope or you have to reduce the time frame. Same way, if you want to change the scope, which we call scope creeps or scope enlargements or scope changes, you suddenly decide, I want an additional bedroom, or I want to change the size of the bedroom. I want the kitchen to be bigger. You're changing the scope of your project. It happens in software development project. It happens in many projects that we call as projects, where you suddenly decide a scope has to change. Or scope creeps in. Suddenly you say, okay, can we include this as well into the project? Now what happens is your time has an impact because there's additional requirements. There's a cost impact because you need to allocate new resources. So you would understand each time you change one of these 3 things, there's an increase or a change in the other 2 constraints. So this you need to have in your mind. Why? Because in today's world, whether you're working on a hybrid situation or a virtual situation, the constraints would always be the same. If you try to change any of this, it's going to have a major impact on your project and the project quality. So it's quite important for you to understand this triple constraint. Hence, that I spent some time on this. Okay, so now we know what a project is. We know the constraints in a project. We know how what project management is all about. But let's try to understand the benefits of project management, because it's quite important. You would wonder why should we understand? Why do we need to know about project management? Because if you don't know the benefits, you would not see why you should really understand this topic. So if I take you to the next slide, where we talk about the benefits of project management, it is again around the constraints and what we call the knowledge areas, which I'll talk in a few moments. You will now have a clearly defined goal and objectives. When you have a clearly defined goal, you know where you're heading to. So that is the first benefit that you get from proper project management. It improves the time management, because let's take a simple example of studying for an exam. If you know the exam date, you know what your target is and you work for that. But if you're told we are going to have an exam very soon, you would not have a clear time frame. So you would not work for it. So project management would help you to improve your time management, to manage it on time, to handle constraints, as I said. Communication management, which I'm going to talk a bit in length, because one of the main problems we have when it's virtual teams or hybrid teams is communication management. So proper project management brings in improved communication and risk management, effective resource management. As I said, if it's a construction project, you have human resources, labor, you have construction material, you have time to manage. There's so many resources to manage. And that helps you by project management. It helps you to manage your resources in the best possible way and handle the risks in the best way, because there's a particular knowledge area that we'll be talking very slightly today, because it's quite broad when you talk about the 10 knowledge areas, where risk management is considered at the planning phase and execution phase. You can avoid certain risks, you can mitigate certain risks, and you can minimize risks if you handle it professionally with project management techniques. And obviously, you increase stakeholders. Who's a stakeholder? Anyone who has an interest in your project, whether it's a project sponsor, whether it's a user, whether it's a participant, or a resource that's part of the project itself. By managing a project well, you satisfy or you increase the satisfaction of each and every stakeholder. So it's quite important for us to manage stakeholders as well. And that's one of the benefits of project management. As I said, if you manage all these things, especially the triple constraints, it leads to improved quality, because nobody would want an inferior quality product, service, or result. Whether it's a software, whether it's an engineering problem, or whether it's a construction problem, or even a simple project that you're doing in a university as a team, you wouldn't want an inferior quality because there are clearly defined scopes. And finally, cost savings. If you manage projects well, because when you manage projects, when you plan for projects, there's sometimes things that we bring in slacks, we bring idle times, we bring in what if situations, we have miscellaneous budgets, just to make sure that we manage the risk. So if you do manage the project well, you are going to save your cost at the end. So these are some of the more benefits that you would have in project management. Of course, it's not comprehensive, but it is, and it's not exhaustive, but it is some of the benefits that you can expect by project management. So today, when you talk about remote teams and hybrid teams managing projects, the same benefits would apply in your projects as well. Okay. So I mentioned there are 10 knowledge areas that have been defined, and this has been defined once again by the Project Management Institute, because they believe if you manage these 10 knowledge areas, it would lead into successful project delivery. So let's go into understand what are these 10 project areas. I'm not going to dive deep into it, but I'll just mention it so that it would create awareness if you're not aware about it. Once again, if you do know about it, please bear with me because I'm going through some of the fundamentals before we go into today's deep topic. So the 10 project areas, project knowledge areas, project management knowledge areas begins with project integration management. It is normally defined as the first knowledge area. However, it is an integration of all the knowledge areas that we are going to talk about. So at the end, you need to manage integration of your scope. You need to manage everything together. That integration needs to be handled well. If you don't handle the integration, even if you manage each and every knowledge area in its own silo, in its own independence, if you don't integrate that at the end in terms of managing the project, it's not going to support you. So you need to handle project integration quite well. We talked about project scope. Once again, if I tell you, a project scope has a clear objective or objectives, it has clear definition of what your deliverables are about. If you don't manage the scope, if you allow scope creeping, as I mentioned earlier, if you allow scope changes, your project is not going to end successfully. And we know this in our experience. If you've seen large government-based construction projects or even private construction projects, you would have experienced projects where they run out of money suddenly and they have to stop the whole thing. Or classic examples, even in NASA projects, there have been poor management in scope because of not understanding the scope by having multiple teams. In the past, there have been rockets that have failed, there have been space shuttles or other satellites that have gone out of the gravitational orbit. There are software engineering projects that have never been completed because most of the time, rather than the success of projects, there are failures, and this is why it requires us to manage our scopes properly. Then the third knowledge area is time management. Today, we have a time for this webinar. If you do not manage the time, we are not going to manage your expectations. So any project has a particular time target. There are times that by managing it well, you might go ahead of time, which is good. It's a good problem to have because if you're saving time, there's always opportunity. If there's a possibility for time to overrun, you can manage it because you've saved time. But never should a project run over existing time. If you remember the triple constraints, if you go over time, it would definitely have an impact on your scope or your cost or both. So you need to really manage your time. And for managing time, there are a lot of tools in physical world that you would have. Today, I will be talking about certain tools and techniques that we can use for project time management at project level and at individual level, especially when you're working as a virtual team or as a remote team. Cost management, we all know how important it is, especially in a global recession situation at the moment. Cost is a concern even at an individual level. If you take an organization, if you take a team, cost management is quite important because you do not want to have cost overruns. You do not want to walk up to the project investors, stakeholders, or sponsors and say like, sorry, we haven't anticipated this. This particular problem has occurred. We need more funds. Nobody wants to be in that situation. So project cost management is a key area. And then the next is project quality management. Quality is very subjective, but with project scope, quality can be clearly defined because you would define the deliverables. You would have project KPIs, key performance indicators defined. And if you have these in place, you would know what the intended quality is. If you take a construction project, the example I took, you would specifically say, I need the wood to be of this particular grade. I want the steel to be of this particular grade. I want the mixture of your concrete to be of a particular quality. The sourcing of material, you would define the quality. You would define the experience that you use on the project team. Because if you don't have the right experience and the right teams, you're not going to manage your project to the expected quality. So quality management has its own ways. And you know, in today's world, there are standards that define. So sometimes in projects, we do define the particular ISO standard, or if it's a food related project, it's a product development, there'll be food safety standards. So quality management itself is a deep topic. There are a lot of areas that you could discuss, which I'm not going to talk in detail today, but it's one of the key areas that we need to keep in mind. So let me move in to the second set of slides where we talk about the next 5 knowledge areas. Project human resource management, a very important aspect. And this is one of the aspects that is really getting impacted when it's virtual teams or when it is hybrid teams. So today we are going to talk about this because the human aspect is probably one of the most important factors. I'm not saying the rest are least important, but if you do not manage your project team, if you don't manage your human resources, it's like an organization. Your project is bound for failure. And human resources management applies in many ways, because in a real project, you may have crisis situations. Your project team members individually may have certain situations. It could be a country situation when you're working in a virtual team. It could be, example, it could be a power failure, so people cannot connect. It could be a natural disaster like landslides, earthquakes, or maybe even uh, a situation where there's civil unrest. Right? So what do you do in situations like that? Or it could be a technology failure where the particular laptop or computer a particular individual is using has failed. So managing human resources in your team is very, very important. There are so many dimensions, so many things you need to manage. And when you have a physical team where you meet them day to day, it's so much easier. But as opposed to looking at a remote or hybrid team where people are connecting from various parts of the country or the world or different time zones, it's not going to be easy. So human resource management is a key thing, which in some of the areas we'll be discussing, we'll be touching upon. Communication management. Again, I would say one of the most important things, and I will spend some time on this, because if you look at most of the project failures in the world, whether it is NASA, whether it's governments, whether it's private organizations, most of the time it's because of communication issues. And communication issues can be many ways. It could be how you pass the message or how you interpret the message, or it could be the channel you use. All these things impact in your communication when it comes to project management. So we need to really understand the project communication in this sense. I talked a little bit about risk management. There are frameworks for risk management. The most common thing is you would run scenario planning. You'll be having, you look at probability and severity levels. There are certain matrices we draw, certain tables we manage when it comes to risk, in terms of anticipating what would happen if these are the risks that are possible, what are the severity levels of them, what likelihoodness or probability it has. So you need to manage project risks well before, during, and towards the completion of the project. So this is the area I'm not going to talk about today, but again, an important thing. Project procurement management. Now, we feel when the moment we talk about procurement, purchasing, we think this is applicable only when it comes to physical projects, which is not, even when it comes to virtual world, because you need to manage certain software, which I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about certain tools, certain software as a service, which are cloud-based software that you could use. You need to procure them. You need to get the right license for them. Sometimes you need to get the right technical tools, laptops, computers to your team. Sometimes you need to support the internet connectivity. So in doing this, you need to do certain procurements. Maybe you need to buy certain things as a team. Maybe you need to allocate funds for certain purchasing. Maybe you need to have clear management and negotiation with these software vendors to make sure that you get the best out of these tools that you're going to purchase for your project teams. So procurement management, again, whilst I will not go into deep, is again an important element and a knowledge area that you need to manage. And the final knowledge area is stakeholder management. There's no point, no matter how good you do your project, if your stakeholders are not satisfied. And when we mean stakeholders, once again, a stakeholder is anyone who has a direct or indirect interest of your project. It could be someone who is investing on the project. It could be someone who is benefiting from the project as a user or as a community. It could be someone who's part of the project. You need to manage your stakeholders. If the stakeholders are not happy, it could lead into disaster. It could lead into failure. So remember, stakeholder management is one of the things that is managed, needs to be managed. And again, in today's discussion, we will be touching upon the stakeholders from a team's aspect and how we can manage stakeholder communication through the tools that we use. So these are the 10 knowledge areas. As I said, I reiterate, go ahead and look at the PMBOK, the project management body of knowledge. It has detailed explanation on these subjects, on each of these topics. There are certain ways you can measure them, and each knowledge area can be measured. If you know those, you can manage it in detail. So once again, I'm sorry if I have taken some time here, but it's quite important for us to know what areas in a project needs to be managed. So with this, let me jump on to how we can manage a project, because there is a key individual that we need to always manage in a project, and that's the project manager. Project manager is the main person who would make sure a project would be successful. It's the project manager that would get the credit as well as most of the time the blame of a project not being successful. And this is why there are project managers as profession. There are project managers who need to get certified. If you go into Project Management Institute, they offer something called the PMP, Project Manager Certification, which is required. If you look at any job vacancy out there for project manager, most of the time they would expect you to have the right knowledge, expertise, and experience and certifications, because a project manager would be the most critical element in a project. And I must iterate, you don't need to be a functional expert in project management when it comes into a project. For an example, if you're in a software engineering project, yes, it would be advantageous and it'd be good for you to have the software engineering background, but it is not a must. Same when it comes to construction or any other project that we are talking of. Even in a hospitality industry, entertainment industry, event management situation, you would have projects. An event itself is a project if you're organizing an event. So you do not need to know more details about that particular event. All you need to know is how to manage the event and manage the team. So sometimes we believe functional expertise is required to be a project manager. It's a nice to have, but it doesn't need to be a main requirement. What you need is project management skills. What are these skills that you require? What are the roles a project manager would play? Number one, project planning. It is the most important thing for you to start the project. You need to plan from resources to the timing, and these 10 knowledge areas I discussed. You need to have good project planning skills, and that's one of the main things that a project manager should do. Project execution. Once you've kicked off the project, once you started the project, you need to make sure that the project is executed in the right way, that every week, every day that we manage it. In today's world, we talk about agile project development. We talk about lean project management, which is coming off the the practice that was developed by Toyota Production System, because Toyota Production System introduced lean production into the world, and lean methodologies were taken into software industry, which were later on called agile project development or agile projects. Same thing is brought into project management today, where agile practices or lean practices are brought in, which supports the execution of projects to make sure that you meet the 10 knowledge areas that I discussed about. So a good project manager today would have that experience. They would have the knowledge to execute the project, manage the project, and even handle risk or crisis situations to make sure that we do not go beyond the stakeholders' expectation or the triple constraints. Communication. As I said, I cannot reiterate saying communication is very, very important, no matter who you are, as a project manager or a stakeholder or a project team member. Communication plays a vital role, because this is the only way that teams would pass a message across to each other. So communication is a big role of a project manager, whether it's to their team or whether it's to the stakeholders or the management. It's quite important. We talked about risk management. They have to be able to risk manage, quality manage the team. Again, a very important thing and very difficult when it comes to remote and hybrid situations, because when you have a team close by, when you see them, sometimes you know what's happening. Looking at facial expressions, body language, you would know what's happening with teams. If things are not working, it's a matter of turning and talking and asking and discussing. But when you have a remote team, a virtual team, it's not as easy as it is. And why I am able to talk about this is because I manage teams from as an entrepreneur, as part of consultancy. From 2020 onwards, we were compelled, because of the pandemic, to have teams working around the world in different time zones online. And that enabled me to really manage teams, understand how important virtual management or remote management or hybrid management is in today's context. So I'm coming and I'm talking with first-hand experience, having experience and skills managing teams in various aspects, in digital marketing and the creative side, in software engineering side, and even certain other practices from consultant side. So I will be able to share some of my knowledge and experience and how team management have gone wrong or what are the challenges we'll be discussing as we go on. And we talked about stakeholder management. So same project management areas needs to be managed by a project manager. So now we've discussed what a project is, we've discussed what project management is, we've discussed what are the knowledge areas in projects that needs to be managed, we discussed the role of the project manager, and let's discuss what are the existing team structures of projects. So if you look at the team structures, these are the commonly defined teams. Earlier, before the virtual world, we had only functional, dedicated, and matrix teams, and co-located teams came later. But today we have something that we talk about as virtual teams. A functional team is a team that is joined together for a particular task, particular function, and they work together. Whereas a dedicated team is for the entire project, you will have a dedicated team who would not change. Functional teams would come and go based on the functional requirement of the project. Example, you may have a functional team who's in construction. So if it's a construction project, when it comes to particular construction, let's say structural construction, you may have a functional team who would handle the structural construction. And once the structural construction is done, their requirement of being in the project is no more. So they move away. Whereas if you talk about a project, let's say in real life, let's take a university project for an example, an MBA project, where a set of students are getting together to deliver an entrepreneurial project. You would have a dedicated team because throughout that subject matter, you can't change the team. It's the same team that will be working together from beginning to end. So that's a dedicated team. Whereas when you look at a matrix team, it's a combination of functional and dedicated team. So let me show you this diagram that would explain. In a dedicated team, you have a project manager who's on the top, and then you have the project team under the project manager. Whereas if you look at a functional project, you will have a project manager who's at the bottom, who's on the left. If you notice over here, that's the project manager. And on top, who you have is the functional team manager. So each functional team would have a team manager, but the project manager would be dedicated and would be there throughout the project without change. And over here, you have the project team. But if you look at a matrix team, you would have a project manager and you would have a functional manager who would be working hand in hand, because there'll be different functional managers and the project managers, and they have the equal responsibility when it comes to a matrix team structure, and the project team is below. So in today's world, you would see most of the time matrix team structures in operation as opposed to functional or as opposed to dedicated teams. And when it comes to virtual worlds, once again, I would say remote teams would mostly work in a situation like a matrix team. And if I take you back to the previous slide, let me just erase this. Yeah. You would have co-located teams. Now, co-located teams would be, if you take for an example, if you take Tesla for an example, take Tesla manufacturing, they would have different factories which are based in particular locations, and teams are brought in for that location. And teams, probably they'll fly down particular experts to be in that project, even if they are not located in that area. So What happens in co-located projects are the functional experts or experts for that project will be located into a physical location and area to manage that particular project. Again, in today's context, which is moving away because of the ability to work as remote teams, as virtual teams. Virtual teams is quite straightforward. If you're connected, if your team is connecting from different countries, different time zones, then you're working on a virtual team. They are not physically present. And this is why it's important for us to understand these team structures, because now I am able to bring you into today's topic. Today's topic is project management in remote and hybrid team environments. Once again, if it's hybrid, you may have teams who would probably go as co-located or as dedicated or functional teams into physical office, into working in a physical team, but saying that there'll be certain time out of the 40 hours of a week that they will be working remotely from their home or from any other location virtually. So when it comes to this area, it's very challenging. You need to manage expectations, right? You need to manage the 10 knowledge areas. And that is why today's topic is important and relevant to us. So when we talked about these things today, I said one of the key elements is communication management. And I'm going to talk a bit about communication management because this is the single most important thing that needs to be managed and that will be failed when it comes to remote and hybrid team environments. Because communication always is quite important, and the more you communicate, the more you have discussions with teams, the success rates are higher. And this is the same thing that prevents you when it's a virtual team. Because when it's a virtual team, what happens is you cannot communicate the same way you would communicate as of a physical team. So what happens is you would have gaps. You would not be able to manage things together. I just noticed, I know we have a Q&A, but there's a question asking about hybrid teams. Hybrid means both virtual and on-site. That is correct. So if your team is connecting, if your team meets physically as well as the team works virtually, then we call it a hybrid team. Okay. So coming back to the topic, communication management. To manage your communication well, you need to have a communication management plan, and good project managers would know how it would work. They would clearly define what are the main tools, what are the main methods that we would communicate with the team. For an example, they would say, okay, we will use email for official purpose. And your plan would define that. You may have templates for it. You may define, okay, how do we manage emails? Who should we send emails to? Who should we copy in an email? Should the whole team be copied in an email? Should it be always addressed to the project manager? Should it be addressed to the customer or the key stakeholder? Right? That would be clearly defined in a communication management plan. You would be told what tools to use, how to use, what templates to use. So a good communication management plan would have all this defined and explained across the team. Excuse me. Sorry. And if you look at communication management, as I said, you need to clearly define what the communication tools are. You need to define what methods you use. You need to define what technology you're going to use. And in today's program, I'm going to explain what tools are available there, what tools can be used online, and how we are going to use it, and how we could use it among team management and even individual management. Because one of the key problems we'll be talking about is self-discipline. When you're working virtually, when you're working from home or you're working remotely, one of the biggest complaints and biggest issue I've seen is self-management. Even if you have a project manager, the project manager could do certain things only. Each team member in the project needs to manage themselves. So I'm going to talk about certain technologies which will help us in communication and managing self. Then, as I said, stakeholder engagement, and there are certain feedback and reporting. If you're using agile methodologies for projects, you would have something called sprints. So you would have weekly sprints, you would have maybe monthly sprints. A sprint is something that you define as a particular time frame. So you would have 7-day sprints, you would have 5-day sprints or monthly sprints. The way you define your sprint, you would have a sprint review. You would have maybe daily stand-ups. In physical world, we call huddles sometimes. You would have meetings where a team comes together and they discuss every day before they commence the project. These are the daily tasks. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're responsible. End of the day, these are the things we are going to achieve. So your mechanism of having meetings and reporting it and providing feedback could be daily, could be sprint based, could be weekly based, could be monthly based, but this needs to be clearly defined in your communication management strategy, in your communication management plan. If your team doesn't know, okay, I'm supposed to provide feedback instantly when it comes to certain severity levels, I'm supposed to provide feedback end of the day or end of the week, then your communication management is going to fail. It's not going to be managed. Your project manager needs to manage this as well. So these are the things that you need to look at in terms of communication management, and we are going to discuss this as we go on. So now we've understood these aspects, and I'm going to tell you the 5 key stages that we need to manage when we are looking at projects. Because if you do not understand these stages, you wouldn't know how and what tools to use at each and every stage. These are the common 5 stages in any project. You have the project initiation. This is where we do the project plans. This is where we explain the scope to the project team and stakeholders. This is where we come to agreement as to what we are going to do in the project. And once you've done this initiation, where we call, sometimes you do this initiation in a kickoff, the project planning happens. Sometimes project initiation and project planning, project initiation could happen internally as a communication after the project planning happens. I'll explain why. What happens is, as a project team, you initiate, you come into conclusion, you draw project plans, and then you communicate to stakeholders and officially say the project is initiated with the kickoff. So it would, in a communication point of view, happen after planning, but in reality, project initiation happens the moment you get the project team, the moment you decided the scope, and the moment you start planning. So project initiation is the first step. Then you have project planning, and then the execution. This is where you manage the project and the project scope, the project time, all the knowledge areas we are talking about throughout the project. And constantly you have project monitoring and controlling. What do you mean controlling? Is you need to manage things where you kind of have areas where you go out of scope, or if you go out of time, if you go out of cost, you need to drag and bring things together. You need to manage those. You need to look at slack times. You need to look at where are we falling off. If there's a crisis, how do we manage that? So there's constant monitoring and controlling. And this is what I mentioned, a project manager's role is. They need to make sure they are monitoring it throughout the project, and they do not lead to surprises at the end of the week, end of the sprint, end of the month, end of critical project milestones to find out things are not delivered. So constant monitoring and controlling means you are managing things in the best suited way. And finally, you would close the project. Project closure happens when the expected scope deliverables are achieved, and when those scope, when everybody signs off saying, yes, it has been completed to the success and the expectation of the stakeholders. And that's project closure. So we need to manage these 5 stages, and managing these 5 stages, we need to have the right team, right tools, right techniques. And this is what I'll be talking about. I'll quickly take you through the most common documents that a project team would have. Saying this, not every project would have all these documents, but why I'm showing this is because when it comes to remote teams, when it comes to hybrid teams, one of the critical things is managing these documents. Because in a physical world, maybe you would have documents printed, maybe you would have templates that you're filling physically, but in a remote team, you cannot have these documents all over the place. It has to be managed in a central location. It has to be accessible. It has to be transparent and visible. Project charter is what clearly defines what you're trying to achieve in your project. It's a promise. The project team and stakeholders together kind of mentions as what you're going to achieve. Project plan, most of the time in what people are used to are using project plans in Gantt chart formats. I'll be explaining it and I'll show you a Gantt chart as we go in. But there are various tools that you can use today in terms of project planning. A work breakdown structure also, which is called as a WBS, is a breakdown of each task list by the most expressive way you could think. So you would have main topic, example, project initiation, and project initiation would have breakdowns under that, saying initiation meeting, and under initiation meeting, you would have communication meeting, and so on and so forth. So you would have multiple breakdowns of your project tasks, and you would number it most of the time. A WBS would really have clear numbers, so you can refer to particular task item saying 2.1.11, and anybody could go to the work breakdown structure and know what exactly are we talking about. You would have the risk management plan, as I discussed, communication plan. I talked in length about communication plan, what a communication plan would have and why it's important. Status reports, because you need to share reports with the stakeholders. And in olden days, status reports were manual folders, documents that were shared. In today's world, it could be emails, it could be one of the ways that we'll be sharing using the tools I'll be talking about. Change management plan, no matter how good you are, changes will happen. If I take the same example of building a house, when you see certain things, you would make changes. You would say, oh, can we probably change the color? Though I said, I would like this color. Can we look at this? Can we change the texture of this? Can we change that? So change management will always happen in projects as you go on. But the important thing is you should be able to manage those changes and document those changes. That is where change management plan comes into play as a document. Quality management, there'll be quality standards, as I mentioned, whether it's ISO or whether if it's software development, you may have CMM levels, capability maturity levels. If it's food industry, you will have things as HACCP or so on and so forth. So you need to have proper standards and you need to have documentation, checklists, and plans for managing that. Stakeholder management plans. Now, as I said, this is not a comprehensive list, neither is it a list that is mandatory for each and every project, but you have all these communication documents in a project or documents in a project that needs to be managed, and you need to know how to manage it when it's a virtual team. Okay, so let's go into today's topic area in a bit detail. How do we manage the projects when it's remote and hybrid teams? When it's virtual or whether it's virtual plus physical, we need to manage this. So I would like to take you across certain challenges that we would face when our teams are remote or hybrid. If you have ever worked, and I'm sure most of you would have been working remotely, or you would have tried working remotely, or there would have been some experience that you would have connected online, and probably in the comments you could post saying whether you have faced these challenges or if there's anything that's missing that you would have faced, because these are the most common challenges that one would go through when it's a remote team. Number one, as I said, I'm not going to explain this again, communication challenges. Very common and probably the number one challenge that you would have when it's a virtual team, a remote team. If you're talking about a team that is connecting from different ethnicities, different states, if you're talking about a big country, like you take even Africa, India, China, you would have like teams who are working in different states, different cities, who have different cultures, different languages, right? Or if you're talking of a global team where your team is connecting from different countries, you would still find cultural differences, language differences, which becomes a barrier. I'll give you a classic example. I believe this happened with one of NASA projects when they were managing the project for a satellite launch. there were two teams that were working two different systems. One team was working on the metric system, and another team was working on inches and feet and pounds and the British system. So what happens is when the teams get together, suddenly they realize whilst they had measurements, they had metrics, they were using it in different, they were measuring it wrongly. So this cannot happen. And if this happens just because of a cultural difference or a country difference or an educational difference, your project is going to suffer. Same way language. The common thing is we know in communication even, the way certain countries say yes, the body language would differ from country to country. Same way, if you're using communication, whether you're typing it, if your language is not a standard, you're going to have effects. And I've seen this in remote teams, cultural differences, language difference. There are certain cultures where people are not very vocal. They don't openly talk about it. They don't challenge the project manager. They don't challenge issues that they're facing. Whereas there are certain cultures where they are very open and they're clear cut. A meeting is a meeting. If you take a 1 hour meeting, it's very productive. Whereas some cultures, you start with small talk and you cannot blame one over the other because it's how culture is managed from different countries and different teams. So if you don't set your expectation, if you don't say, this is how we manage our meetings, your cultural aspects will come in and people would say, oh, this is how we grew up. This is how we manage things. So cultural language barriers are very, very important and it needs to be taken as a challenge. Lack of team cohesion. We are going to talk about this because if you don't meet, especially in a remote environment, you will meet teams for the first time who you have never met in your life. That will have an impact because you wouldn't know. For an example, I'm meeting Priyadarshini for the first time today online, right? All I know about her is what I see about her today. All of you are connecting, you would determine me just by the way I'm presenting myself. You wouldn't really know me. So this is a common challenge. When a team is connecting for the first time, they would know the other person. They would know how they work, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. So these things matter for managing your teams. Difficulty in managing workloads because sometimes remotely, especially if you're starting fresh as a virtual team member, maybe you don't have self-discipline. You wouldn't know how to manage your task. A common task that would take 3 hours for you might take 4 hours. Whereas for another person, it might be 2 hours. So you need to be able to manage workloads and manage this. So I'll be talking about these things. Time differences, which is again a very common issue, very big challenge when it comes to remote teams connecting from various countries. Like today we started by saying good morning, good afternoon, and good evening because we have teams, individuals connect from all over the globe. And in my culture, today is a very important day. It's a New Year festival for us. So when you meet and greet, you need to bring in these aspects. You need to be able to manage those time differences. You need to manage those differences of culture. And it's quite important. Otherwise, teams will not work together. Another common aspect is cybersecurity because when you work in virtual teams, unlike an office environment where you're connecting to the common server of your office for documentation, you will be accessing things globally. Sometimes teams would even use their mobile devices. They'll use their phones, they'll use their tablets, they'll use their laptops, which opens up a new area of risk where you would be basically exposing the whole company, the whole project through cybersecurity. So I do see in Southeast Asia, Cambodia, and Thailand also, there's a mention of today being New Year. So you would see, so certain teams, for an example, like today, certain teams would not be working because it's officially declared holiday. And if the project manager had allocated tasks and not seen that today as a holiday or next week as a Eid holiday or last week as a Easter holiday, it's going to impact because you're going to have teams who are connecting who have their own leave that is required, which is required legally and which is required for their betterment. If you don't consider these things, these are going to be challenges. All of a sudden you feel, oh, shoot, I didn't think about today being a holiday in this part of the world. And I've expected this task to end by this weekend. You're going to find a challenge. technology failures. As I said, your laptop might fail, your mobile might fail, your internet might fail. What do? You can't blame your teammates because of something that's beyond their control. So how do you manage that? This is where, again, the right tool sets are important. Because if you're going to, for an example, manage things on your laptop, if your presentation is on your laptop and your laptop fails, you're going to really lose out on that as a team, as an individual. This is why you might use cloud technology today. This is why you would use collaboration tools that I'm going to talk about. And lack of trust. Because as I said, when you meet, and this is something, again, personally I've experienced, I've hired teams online where I've never met individuals to date. And then there are teams that I've hired, and then when I meet them, it's a totally different experience. Because sometimes you think, oh, this person is tall, this person is like this person is of this interest. But when you meet them physically, it's a total different realization. So whether we like it or not, when we work on virtual teams, we need to let go of these differences. We need to love these assumptions, because whether we like it or not, perceptual biasness is going to be there. We are going to have certain biasness. We are going to think about people. And this brings in trust issues. So how do we manage this trust? So I'll be talking about certain things that can be done from team building point of view, as a project manager, as an entrepreneur, as a business manager, that you could use in managing your remote teams. So let's take it step by step and go ahead. You could send your questions in the chat. Priyadarshini and the team from Uni Athena would go through them, and we would be addressing some of these questions towards the end. So please go ahead if you have any questions. And if I'm keeping a slide eye on the questions as well. If I see something relevant, I'll also address it as we go on. So we talked about challenges that we face. Okay, I've talked about the importance of effective communication, so I'll quickly go through this. But in managing this, in making your communication effective, you need to have the right tools. No matter how good you are as a speaker, as a orator, as a physical communicator, when it comes to online world, when it comes to virtual teams, when it comes to remote teams, it doesn't help. It can help into certain extent, but you need to have the right communication tools. For an example, we are using Zoom, and many people in the world didn't know of such virtual tools before the pandemic. Whilst it was used by certain companies, certain individuals, certain teams, majority wouldn't know how to use Zoom. Today, I'm able to talk with my parents who are in a different country using Zoom, using WhatsApp, which if before the pandemic, I told them, they would have been technophobic. They would say like, no, I don't want to. I don't know how to. So today, communication and tools have changed. People have been pushed to use these tools. Today, we are using Zoom, we are using Google Meet, we are using Microsoft Teams, we are using Skype, which was one of the early day tools. People are now using this for communication. And we need to know, okay, what tool do we use and when? In my organization, we use Slack. And before that, we used to use WhatsApp, we used to use Facebook Messenger sometimes. But what we realized is there are pros and cons of each tool. So if you don't pick the right tool, no matter how you try to have it as a tool that enables you, it could disable you as well. As I said, you need to have clear communication expectations. You need to have regular check-ins. For an example, if you have a team and somebody is suddenly offline, suddenly not well, or has a personal crisis, how would you know about this? Yes, you can put protocols, you can put processes, you can tell them you must inform us. But there are simple things that you could do to enhance this for you to know and them to kind of inform you, notify you that, I'm off today, I'm off for lunch. For an example, a common thing would be if somebody's taking a lunch break. Now, in a physical environment, you would know that when the person is not in the seat, and if it's maybe 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, it's the lunch break, or everybody goes for lunch break at the same time. But when you connect remotely and teams are connecting from different places in the world, you can't keep track of the lunch times. You're not going to check, okay, are they in lunch first? So sometimes at a glance, your team should be, project manager or team member should probably know that this person is off for lunch. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to frustrate the person by messaging them, calling them, using whatever these tools, and they say, I'm sorry, I can't take this call now because I'm in lunch, I'm having lunch. So how do we do this? If you have the right communication tools, you could do that. Example, Slack. If you use Slack, you can put a simple emoji. There are options where you can say out for lunch, out of office, traveling. You can do it on your calendars. So there are ways you could do this if you have the right tools. So you don't need to really probably check in. It can be visual. On the other side, there would be regular check-ins that is required as well. Of course, you have to encourage open communication. Personally, I've always been telling my teams, there's nothing wrong by communicating and telling what you want or what you dislike. You need to agree to disagree. You need to be able to be open for communication. Gone are the days that as a project manager, as a manager, as an entrepreneur, as a business head, as an owner, you could say like, it's my way or no way. You cannot do that anymore. You need to, especially if you're looking at remote teams, if you're looking at open communication, you should be able to accept and honor open communication systems. Your team should be able to say what they want, when they want, and you should be able to take it in an objective way. Use of visual aids. You notice when I was explaining the team structures, I had to draw. I had to use tools that I could mark as I would do in the physical world. If I was explaining something on a whiteboard or a blackboard, I would mark it. I would notify it. I would point at it. Now, how do I do the same thing on virtual world? I need to use tools that would help me to do that. You should, as this presentation, we should have a good combination of text and graphics. Maybe we need to use video. Maybe we need to use examples. We need to bring case studies. We need to use prototypes. Whatever your project type is, you should have visual aids. And that would help communication. Because otherwise, what happens is it's just going to be either audio, it's going to be text, and there's going to be a lot of misunderstanding. As I said, time zones, I'm not going to explain that, and clarity on teams and responsibility. Again, a very common pitfall I notice when it comes to projects. People, if they don't have clearly defined roles, if you don't know the responsibilities, it's going to end up in project failures. Communication. So now we are getting into probably the interesting topic, the relevant areas. If you look at tools, the most common tools we might use in virtual world is email. Still, it's surprising, but you would find many companies who don't use emails, or they have common emails where it will be like sales team, it will be like procurement team, it will be manager at, or it will be sales at. But emails are supposed to be used as an individual communication method, where if you have an email address by your name, it's the most important thing, and it's official. Even most of the legal entities, or most of the legislation in the world today accepts email as official communication. There was a time where people had to use Telegram. I don't know whether some of you who are connecting here have heard that word, because Telegram today is an online tool. But there used to be something that was called Telegram, which is a wired form of communication before email and before even telephones. There were times that people required a written signature, but today you can scan and send it. You can have a digital signature. Things are changing. Okay? So email is one form. Video conferencing, like what we are doing today, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, Google Meet, all these things are video conferencing tools. There was a time, again, companies used to invest heavily on having video conferencing tools which are a wired format, which needs particular networks, which needs expensive television screens with rotational cameras. Today, technology has made it so easy that with a simple webcam or with a standard laptop cam, you can have video conferencing, you can talk. Instant messaging tools. As I said, one of the companies I work, we used to use Facebook Messenger, we used to use WhatsApp. But today we are using things like Slack, we are using things like Notion. We've changed the instant messaging into something better, because instant messaging today is, again, it has improved with screen sharing, it has improved with audio message sharing. You can simply record something and send through your instant message. Okay, so you need to use the right tools in terms of instant messaging, because gone are the days where instant messaging was just chat. Because if you ever learn communication, communication consists of, mostly we think it's the words, but words play about 7% of your communication. Non-verbal communication and verbal communication plays, more than that. If you look at tonality, tone and body language plays a big role. So when you do instant messaging, which is text, you lose that tonality. So what prevents you from sending an audio message? If you're used to WhatsApp audio message, you know what I'm talking about. It's always easier than typing because you know the tonality. You can quickly record something and send. Tools like Slack would enable you to do that. Then collaboration suites. Collaboration suites are things like Google Workplace, you have Google Slides, Google Docs, Google presentation slides, Google Spreadsheets. Same way, if you look at Microsoft, they have Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PPT. So you have collaboration tools today. Today, you don't need to wait till somebody emails you a document made as you don't need to send a PowerPoint presentation saved as a PPTX. Today, you can work on cloud environment where combinedly you can start working. I can edit this presentation with you if you're connected to my Google Suite or my Microsoft Cloud, Microsoft 360, because we can work together in the same document. We can have video conference, we can have an audio conference and say, hey, what do you think about this point? Can I change this? And the other person can say, let me change it. So you can work collaboratively today because of technology. And this improves your communication. It saves time, number one, because you don't have to wait till the other person finishes something. You don't need to work like a production line where one thing needs to complete for the other thing to happen. You can today work parallelly because of this technology, because of this kind of documentation. You can sign off, you can comment, you can put a comment and ask someone, hey, you can pass a task, you can allocate a task, you can say, I've completed this, can you check this? And you can add a comment with the person tagged onto that. This is how tools have changed. It's not even communication tools, but these are tools that would help you to fine tune and improve your way of working in projects. So if we are to discuss the challenges that I mentioned, how we can overcome this, again, these are things that you could do. You could kind of work about and you can overcome this. Let me quickly take you through how we can overcome. Culture and language, I explained some things. Today, language barrier. For an example, there was a time that people were pushed to learn a universal language. But today, with AI technology, all these tools are coming up with automatically translations. So today, you can take a document and you can use just right click and see, you can translate it over. You can use technology like Google Translate, copy paste it into Google Translate, and you can translate it yourself. With tools such as ChatGPT, then Bard from Google, Magic Write tools, you can do translations immediately. So you can work with a team in Japan, you can work with a team in China, you can work with a team in America or Africa, work on different languages, and with a click of a button, it makes life easy for you to translate. Today, you have the ability to have video conferencing in a particular language and do real-time caption translation using AI technology. You would have experienced this, but with Microsoft, with Google, even with Zoom, I believe, in Zoom, there is an option where you can go and have auto captions. You can click it, and while someone talks, the captions are being seen. So if you cannot even hear, if your audio is failing for some reason, if you do not understand the accent, you can see auto captions can help you. There were days that people used to have translators who would listen and translate for other language. Today, this technology is becoming obsolete with AI and ways that these tools can do it. So we should adopt these things. There's no point if the ability is there in the tool, but if you're not using it. This is what happens. Most of us who use Excel would probably at most use it for additions and subtractions and grouping. But there's so much of other things that you can do on Excel. It's like a phone. You probably might be using it for messaging, calling, taking photographs, but there's so many things you can do on your phone. So adopt the technology to overcome these barriers. Teams, project managers can put announcements about cultural aspects. They can say this team will be on leave or closed on these particular days. You can put a status on your profile saying I'm off or I'm planning. You can have simple things like out of office messages on your email. So use these tools to bring in those aspects. Have cultural neutralization sessions where you have meetups and talk about cultural aspects, where the moment you see a problem, for an example, a common thing in South Asia is you would see in Western cultures where people say yes and no this way. But in South Asia, we have something where we say okay, which is in between. It's yes, no, I'm okay to do it, right? And you would do something like this. Now, a European or an American would wonder why, what on earth is this guy doing? When I ask, can you do this? They're doing this. Is that a yes? Is that a no? So the moment you see such barriers, cultural norms coming in, you need to question, you need to ask. You should ask, hey, Asas, what did you just do? You just did that. Or you just did a thumbs up. What did you mean? Is that an okay? Is that a yes? And you enlighten teams and talk about it. Sorry. I'll be talking about certain team activities for team cohesion. Workload management. Today, with tools, which I'm going to talk about, you can allocate teams, you can see the real-time productivity. You don't need to have time reporting one by one. You can sync things with your calendars and have that with your time management software that will analyze and show how much of work is completed, how much work is lagging. And if you have a challenge as an individual, you can ask as a project manager. As an individual, you can tell your project manager, look, I have challenge of managing this workload. Transparency is the key in these tools. Time zone differences. If you take, for an example, a Google Calendar, you can add in other calendars, other time zones into your calendar. Not many people know this. You just need to go to settings and add the other time zones. And you would, the moment you create an event, a task on your calendar, you could see the other time zones and you would know whether it's a working time zone for others. So find out simple tools like the moment you find a challenge, take it as an opportunity for improvement. Cybersecurity. All these tools I talk about have addressed it. They have their own ways. Sometimes they call two-factor authentication, where you need your mobile or authenticated app to log into these systems. That prevents you from hacks and issues that could bring in, downtime and cybersecurity issues. Cloud solutions like Amazon or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud Platform, they have inbuilt cybersecurity solutions that's brought in. Nowadays, you don't need to worry about expanding your internal IT servers and technology if you adopt cloud technology. Same with technology failure. If you work on collaborative documents, if you work on a Chromebook, for an example, today you're working on an internet platform. If you work on, if your team can have things like virtual terminals, where you do log in from your laptop, but you're logging into a virtual terminal. All the software is installed there. You're not working on your laptop. It's on a cloud environment. You can prevent technology failure. You can hand over things quite easily. If you're taking leave for a crisis or plan leave, you can easily pass on your terminal to another person to work. Same way, all these things would enhance your trust, because if you remove the barriers, perceptions, the areas where people are, failing, and you have an open, transparent culture, trust is automatic. It gets built. So let's move into productivity and tools I was talking of. This slide would be important for most of you. Again, it's not exhaustive. It's not comprehensive, but the tools you can use for communication. As I said, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Zoom, Skype is a bit older, but now it's improved. Slack, I would strongly recommend, is very good. And if you have a team of less than 10, you can use the free version for most of these tools that I mentioned. Zoom, you can use the free version up to, I believe, 40 minutes or something. So you don't need to really spend even to use it and try it and kind of work about it. If you want to adopt a new tool, yes, you can get inspiration from people like us or doing a simple YouTube search. But I would always suggest try it out, use the trial versions. There are a lot of trial versions. Sometimes, as I said, limited use can be free, or you for a limited time you can use it free. Trial it with your team. Don't just adopt a tool just because somebody says it, because for each and every tool team, based on your requirement, it might be suitable, it might not be suitable. Collaboration tools, Notion, Trello, Asana, Basecamp. These are some tools. Notion today has incorporated Notion AI, where it enhances your work crazily. You can just go and say, create a project plan for me with these tasks, and it will start creating on Notion itself. You don't need to even start putting tables, Gantt charts, and all. It just makes your life easy. You can say, give me a RACI matrix. RACI is responsibility, accountability, consultant, and consult and inform. So RACI matrix are where you clearly define who is responsible, who should be consulted, who should be informed, who should be accountable. Okay. All you can do, you go to Notion, you can say, these are the tasks, please create a RACI matrix for these roles, and it will do it with AI in several minutes. So use these tools today. You don't have to spend time, you don't need to wreck your brain to kind of create things or create templates. Project management, again, Jira, Monday.com. These are tools which are very comprehensive. What has happened over time is they've taken the best requirements from around the world. There were days that we used to only live in Microsoft Project or Excel for project management, to put our tasks, put Gantt charts, color them. You don't need to waste your time anymore with these tools. These tools are very AI driven. They have templates. All you need to do is select the right template and adopt it to your team's requirement. Virtual team building. I'll be talking a bit on this. You can use things like Donut, Kahoot, and team bonding for building that trust, building that aspiration, knowing how each and every person can work together. Because if you don't do that, then your team is going to fail. You're going to fail trust. So there are tools that you can watch movies together, right? You can watch Netflix together at the same time, connecting all over the world rather than sharing a screen. So there are ways you could do this team building. Cloud storages. I'm sure most of you would have used Dropbox, WeTransfer, Cloud, Google Drive, OneDrive. This is how you can avoid risks like losing documentation or having a single source of truth, having one place where all your documents are saved and collaboratively worked on. Time management tools. You could use World Clock, virtual calendars. As I said, in calendars, you can put various time zones. So when somebody is requested for a meeting, if you're busy, you can mark your calendar and say you're out that time slot. So you don't have to call someone, ask, are you available? Just use the standard calendar features. You can use the every time zone. There are so many Calendly, so many tools that could help you to manage time across different teams, different time zones. Cybersecurity tools, as I said, using basic antivirus software at your terminal, using firewalls, virtual private networks, could help you. But most of the SaaS products, software as a service product, cloud solutions out there have the right cybersecurity today. So it's a matter of changing your existing tools to cloud tools. So remember these 5 stages that I talked about. I mapped these tools into each stage as to how you can use it. So just if I browse through them, email, I would say, is one single tool that you can use officially for communication, but that should be for end of the day kind of situation, because you need real-time communication when it comes to team management. Do not put emails to say, can you do this for me by end of the day, and expect people to do it, because email is not the right tool for that. If you use something like Slack, you can immediately instant message and say, hey, Azaz, can you do this? Is this the right time? You can have a communication and pass it on to them directly there. Or you can say, I've sent an email. Can you have a look and let me know? You don't have to wait for a response through email itself. You can use other tools to communicate real time. And that's one of the key factors for success in project communication. As I said, Notion, very powerful tool. If you haven't, again, up to 10 members, you can use it free. By the way, I'm not endorsed, I'm not paid by these companies to talk about these tools. I'm just telling you purely from experience and time spent in researching and trying these tools. So it's up to you, as I said, to select whatever the tool, but these are some tools I personally prefer. I'll be talking about Kanban boards in a while. Most of these provide Kanban boards. Microsoft Project. Trello is widely preferred over Microsoft Project today. You can have Kanban boards, you can have teams allocated, you can have responsibilities shared, and everybody could see what's happening. What are the to-do tasks? What are the in-progress tasks? What are the completed tasks? It's all real time. You don't need to do those check-ins, as I said earlier, where check-ins are required. You don't need to ask, hey, Yasas, hey, Priyadarshini, have you completed a task? Because these tools would show where the task is exactly real time. You can use things like Clockify for time reporting, or there are other tools that you can do for time reporting, which again takes it from your calendar, takes it integrated from the tools you're using. So you don't need to go on other days where you need to end of the day sit down and spend about an hour thinking, what did I do today? How much of time did I spend at meetings? How much of time did I spend at this, that, which is honestly a time waste. And most of the time, people do not honestly put their time because they can't remember. Or most of the time it happens end of the week, end of the month, just before salary date, where you realize, oops, I haven't done my time reporting. Let me figure out. It's like filling out your diary. You're not going to do it. There are real-time tools that would help you. So you don't need to fake it anymore. You don't have to use your memory to fill it out. So this slide, I would say, is very important. Gantt chart. I was talking about Gantt charts. Microsoft Project was one of the great tools for Gantt charts, where if you notice on the left side, you will see the project ID and task, where you can break it by days, by responsibilities, and you mark it as to what are the days you're going to use. Gantt charts were important for you to find the dependencies and find out, what's the task completion and who has to do what kind of thing. But today, Gantt charts have progressed from, as I said, the Kanban system. Kanban system was something that was introduced by Toyota Production System, which was a visual identification system. This increased the lean process of Toyota, where real-time visually you can see things in progress, things completed, things that needs to move in from one line of responsibility to another line. And this is how Kanban or project management is today managed in different tools. What you see on the left top, left top is Trello, right top is Monday.com, Microsoft Azure board on left bottom, and Notion on right bottom. As you can see, things today are very visual. You can have it by sprints, you can have it by swim lanes, you can have it by tasks. If you look at the Notion, which is on right bottom, over here, let me annotate this. Sorry, this is Notion. You would say, you can see task by not started, task by in progress, task by completed, task by open. So you could use all these tools to basically find out where each and every task is, who is looking at it. If you notice, you can see the name over here of the person. You can see the priority level. You can give, there's something called the Eisenhower matrix, where you look at task by importance, task by urgency. So you look at whether the task is urgent or important together, and you mark the priority level, whether it's high priority, low priority, or medium priority. All this at a glance can be done. And the important thing is, you can always, like a post-it note, lift it and put it into the other with a simple drag and drop. So these tools really help you to understand how you can manage your projects, how you can visually see it at a glance. You can see the owners, you can see the due dates, you can see the completion rates, you can see the status just by looking at these tools. So as I said, with AI, these tools are becoming more knowledgeable, more comprehensive, and more important. So try these tools. These are quite important tools, and that's why I've taken screenshots to show you these things. So I talked about keeping teams motivated. How can you do this team bonding activity? This is very important, especially when it's virtual, when it's remote, when people are stuck in their homes and working. You're just limited to these virtual meetups, virtual calls, which are very official and you don't talk, there's no fun. So things you can do is you can have virtual meetups, maybe every Friday evening or Thursday evening. Friday plans are there individually. Maybe you can have virtual movie nights. As I said, you can use tools where you can share movies together, watch movies together real time. The moment somebody takes a break to pick up something for a washroom break, the movie stops for everyone. There are cloud virtual tools that could help you. You can have virtual quizzes. You can use something like Kahoot, where you 1 month you have a quiz night, another month you have a puzzle night. You can have virtual escape rooms. Be innovative, be creative, figure out how you can do this. You can do this across seasonal events, like maybe you take event like Christmas, Halloween, and you kind of make that, a puzzle night, escape night, or theme night. But you need to do this as you do in physical office. You need to have events that caters to your virtual and remote sessions. So go ahead and think how you can be creative and how you can do these things. Other than that, you need to have reward systems. You need to have reward when you have milestone achievements, when a particular project has been completed on task. You need to have best practice sharing. Tools like Asana, Confluence, Notion, you can have best practice documents. You can have processes document where everyone can see. You can see, okay, these are immediately when you finish a project task, you can have a learning mechanism. You can have what we call a post-mortem document. You can share where we went wrong, what we went wrong, and how we overcame that. Or you can put in a best practice saying, okay, these are things we did and this is how we overcame it, and this is why it's a best practice. We should use it the same way the next time. You can share all the documentation on these tools. Appreciation and recognition, again, very important. People would love to be wished on their birthdays. People would be love to be wished on their season special days. You need to have awards. You need to have recognition. A simple recognition on a Slack channel saying, hey team, we've achieved this milestone. I would like to thank Priyadarshini as a project manager for completing this on task. Just do that. It doesn't lose, you don't lose anything, but you just appreciate and give recognition to teams. You can have recognition emails. You can send it across groups and say, hey, we've done this, we've achieved it. Please join me in congratulating the team. These are simple things still virtually you can do and have a big impact, because people don't really have that appreciation when it comes to virtual world. In physical world, yes, we will clap, we will pat on the back, but virtually you need to do that. And one important thing is you need, as a project manager, as an entrepreneur, to remind people constantly that you can and not that you can't. You need to give them that can-do attitude. If you don't motivate them, remind them, this is a possibility. When you have the morning huddles, when you have the meetups, you need to tell them, we can do this, let's do this. It's going to change things. I think I'll need probably about 10 more minutes. Sorry if I'm going overboard. Priyadarshini, let me know. Just I need to take this on personal management.
Please go ahead. Anyway, it's very informative, shared by all the participants. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much. Working alone. This is the biggest challenge I would say project teams have, because if you don't manage your time alone, you're not going to manage things together. So simple things like to-do lists, schedules, again, can be done using tools like Notion or Slack. There are ways you can create tools and map it. One simple hack I would tell you is don't write long to-do lists. It just demotivates you. It just puts you into situations, end of the day, you feel like, oops, I haven't done anything. Best way is use the Eisenhower matrix. It's a matrix where you mark things by high importance, low importance, high urgency, low urgency. It was developed by President Eisenhower of USA to identify tasks that are important for him, that important and urgent where he can manage, then less urgent but high important, and then anything that's low important, low urgent, he wouldn't focus on that. You can take the same principle. So start every day by putting your to-do list, which is a long list, map it on the important and urgency and break it into chunks. and take it into smaller tasks. Every time you attempt something, have only 3 items on your to-do list. Don't have more than 3 items. When you have 3 items, you are focused, laser focused on those 3 items, and you will be able to manage those 3 tasks and complete them. The moment you complete 3 tasks, it gives you a sense of ownership and satisfaction and self-appreciation to know you completed it. I can talk about productivity, which probably might be a different session altogether, but by having long to-do lists, you're not going to achieve anything. The shorter your to-do lists are, the more focused you'll be, the more accomplished you'll be. Establish routines. Even if you're working at home, wake up at the same time, do your brushing, have your breakfast, change as if you're going to office. It's very important. Don't work on your pajamas. It's not going to help you because our mind needs that change. Even if you're working at home as a remote team, you need to change and think that you're working at an office. Have a dedicated workspace. Even if it's a small corner in your bedroom, have a dedicated workspace where it's clean, managed like an office workspace. Assume people are going to see your workspace. Then you will manage it in the right way. Have post-it notes where you can write down things. Have a small whiteboard. Use that. Set goals and priorities and stay organized. That's the most important thing. If you're not organized, you're not going to manage things in the best possible way. Another thing is when you're working remotely, you need to take breaks. You need to have water. I normally have my glass of water and I have a bottle with me. So I make sure that I hydrate myself quite often because you need that. Take breaks. I'm going to talk about Pomodoro technique as the last thing, which is quite important, which will help you to take breaks. Stay motivated. Make sure that you can work standing if it's possible. There are simple desk tools. I have one which is out of my hand reach at the moment, where I can raise the desk. It's just a simple piece of wood with 2 legs. I can set it on my table and I can set my laptop on that and immediately I can stand and work. Have that. If you're using, try to use something like a smart band, which can remind you to stand. You can set reminders. So you can stand once an hour, work 5 minutes. Whenever you have remote meetings, make sure you can stand. Use a webcam that you can adjust so that you can stand and have meeting. Whenever you have a meeting, stand up. That's an opportunity for you to get your muscles working. Nobody's going to blame you for standing for a meeting. You don't have to be seated. Always push yourself, learn new skills. There's so much of YouTube videos out there. There are so much of platforms like Coursera and like Uni Athena who would help you to learn and adopt and get new skills. Get that. Manage distractions. The most important thing. One thing is you need to manage your mobile phones. If you use tools like Slack, there are tools where you can say post notification for 1 hour, 2 hour, or you can set up a custom time. You can put your phone on flight mode. Nothing is going to be urgent or important. You can, for your loved ones, you can have maybe a particular phone number or a way that they can approach you if there's anything urgent. Everything else can wait. Pomodoro technique is something where it's coming from an Italian word. You take tasks at 25 minutes. Just take every task for 25 minutes. Select one task out of your 3 tasks of to-do list. Spend 25 minutes with distraction free just to complete that. Put a timer. There are Google extensions. If you search Pomodoro Google extension, you can find. Smartwatches, phones have apps for this. You can set the Pomodoro for 25 minutes, complete your task, and then take a 5 minutes break. 5 minutes break means not to check your emails, not to chat with your friends or go on social media. Take 5 minutes off. Take a washroom break, have some drink, make your muscles working, come back and sit for the next 25 minutes. If you spend 25 minutes and 5 minutes break, that's 30 minutes. You can do 4 Pomodoros in 2 hours. Trust me, this is the best technique that will make you very, very productive in managing your own projects, managing yourself. After 2 hours, that means 4 Pomodoros, take a 15-minute or 20-minute break where probably you can just go off, have a snack and really relax. If you can do this, this is one of the best ways you can really improve your productivity. Conflicts that happens mostly are misunderstandings, lack of trust, conflicting priorities because you haven't put your to-do lists, personality conflicts, like I said, because you don't understand people better, lack of accountability because roles and responsibilities are not really mentioned properly, By using clearly defined methods, you will really know who's accountable, who's responsible, and who needs to be informed by having RACI matrix. Technical issues can be sorted the way I explained by using cloud technology and software as a service. So these are some ways you can have clear communication protocols and guidelines. Provide team trainings on how to use these tools, how to use collaborative tools. Have clear goals as a team, as an individual on a daily basis. Provide regular feedback, and always, I strongly recommend foster a culture of transparency, not blame. Be accountability and be honest when you make a mistake to say, yes, I made a mistake, but correct yourself and make sure that it doesn't occur. Transparency and accountability is the key for remote teams and virtual teams success. Excuse me. Have clear, I'm repeating certain things. That's why I'm rushing on this, because I have already mentioned these things. Have clear project objectives and priorities. Communicate with teams effectively when things are not happening, when things are lagging. Ensure your team members are aligned to the same goals. And all this can be done again with clear communication, clear races, clear project plans. Have effective communication. I'm again reiterating these things because you need to know this. When you get the slides, you might feel there's a lot of repetition here. The reason of repetition is, if not, you will really not get that understanding. And encourage your team to be respectful to each other's differences, with its cultural, language, or time zones. That is one important thing that will build your trust. Establish clear roles and responsibilities. Again, can be done with races, can be done with project plans, can be done through communication. Set clear expectations for each team member. When you have your huddles, when you have your daily stand-ups, clearly explain that. Ensure your team members have access to the right and reliable technology. That's the most important thing, that they can back up things. They're working collaborative documents. Their laptops, computers are regularly updated, especially if you use Windows, Apple. There are regular updates that goes with operating system. There should be a technical team who cross-checks and makes sure that these systems are up to date. And most importantly, you train your team to use the tools effectively. So by following these type of techniques, you can resolve conflicts that you find out, and you can really figure out how you can improve your project management skills, project team skills. So that brings us to the key takeaways, and I will have these key takeaways displayed throughout. Number one, what we talked about is establish clear communication protocols and communication plans. Very, very important. Build on individual productivity. If you don't focus self, use techniques like Pomodoro techniques, Eisenhower matrix, or to-do lists, which are short that you can complete and move on to the next, you're not going to be able to contribute as a team. If you're a project manager and entrepreneur, train your teams also to follow these techniques. Use collaboration tools, project management tools, as I explained. Have clear communication and expectations. That is, clarity is the most important thing in projects. Foster a culture of trust. Without trust, your virtual teams cannot perform. The moment you see distrust, you see problems where there's kind of conflict, address it openly. Don't talk behind in chats. Don't talk behind in groups. Openly discuss it. Provide training and support. Have regular check-ins. Enable a culture where people support each other. There's openness to support and contribute. Encourage collaboration. Encourage social interaction. Have those team meetups, as I mentioned, because we need to forget our daily tasks once in a while. We need to be human. We need to be able to make ourselves as a team and work with each other. And then be ready to be flexible and adaptable. If you don't do this, if you're not flexible, if you're not adaptable, it's very difficult to work as a team. So these are some of the best practices that we've discussed, and I would suggest for you for effective project team management. That basically brings me to the end of my side of the presentation. I've run over by extra 10 minutes. Sorry about it, but I think now we can use the time for discussion or to answer questions. Over to you, Pridarshan.
Thank you so much. And I think those extra 10 minutes were really actually blessings for us because we got a lot of knowledge about the personal management that you shared. So thank you so much for it. And I'm going to one by one give the question, highlight the question on the screen, and then maybe you can refer to that and share the answers.
Sure.
You can see one question on the screen. So one of our participants is asking, is project monitoring the same as project evaluation?
Project monitoring is same as project evaluation, is it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Monitoring is ongoing. Evaluation is post-mortem. That's the difference. If I evaluate something, you're checking whether you've done things properly, whether there are things that you didn't do well, and it's a post-mortem analysis. Monitoring is ongoing. You do it as it goes on. You do it every day. You do it every hour, kind of thing. So you monitor as you go on. So there's the difference. It's not the same.
So we have Iqbal asking, how can we target resource to get the new project opportunity?
Can you just repeat it or clarify it again?
How we can target resource to get a new opportunity, project opportunity?
I think that question needs more clarity, because what do you mean by a project opportunity is the question. Are you talking about in an organization, how can you get more project opportunities?
I would require her to make it more specific and share it so that we can
Yes,
get
please.
the answer. The
Yes.
next question is, how can artificial intelligence bring to remote or hybrid project management?
As I said, artificial intelligence can help you by reducing your time and managing things where individually you probably would have to have done things. Even project documentation, for an example. You can use AI to generate by giving the parameters, giving the right prompts and saying, hey, create a project charter for a project that develops software of this nature. You can give the prompt and the project charter can be automatically created. All you need to do is then go through and see how what needs to be changed or whether it's in detail. So you can figure out how AI can help you in these type of things rather than creating things from scratch or taking existing templates and typing everything from scratch. You can use AI to help you in most of these tasks, even creating task lists, creating race matrices, as I said. You sky is the limit with AI. You can be creative and figure out. The moment you feel like you're wasting time, you're doing something repeatable. That's the best thing I would say. If you think you're doing something repetitively again and over, which is boring and you feel like you're wasting your time, it's not your expertise, resort for AI's help in situations like that.
Thank you. The next is from Salman Akram. He's asking, after the set of scope of the project management, if we want to change the scope, means enhance the scope of the project, what impact on the project time and cost? How can we overcome this issue?
Number one, it will always have an impact on time, cost, and scope because you're changing a scope. Number two, you need to get the stakeholders' clearance, whether you need to do the scope change, how important and urgent. Again, you can use the Eisenhower matrix. You can look at the impact, how impactful this change is, because sometimes changes could be simple things like a new report which has no value to your project. So you need to ask those what, how questions and then decide based on the stakeholders' requirement whether it's a scope you should accept or not. And the moment you do that, you need to clearly communicate the change it makes on the overall time and cost on the project. Without getting the approvals for more time or additional cost or additional resources, do not agree for any scope change. That's the classic mistake many project managers do. They say, okay, they accept it, and then they struggle. And somebody has to struggle, either project manager or the project team or the quality. So always be clear on communication when you accept scope changes, how it would impact and bring in impact to others.
Thank you. And I think there is next question, which is actually aligning. So the question is, what is the difference between cost saving and effective resource management?
Okay, when you say resources, it's not every resource would probably be a cost factor, okay, because it could be existing resources being optimized. But if you take cost is directly with your financials. So you can look at things from a cost saving perspective and see how can I reduce, how can I manage, how I can reallocate certain savings in terms of cost. But there are situations, there's an intersection of both cost and resources, but you need to figure out, I think if I go to the question, you need to figure out, I believe the question is asked in a sense of where to compromise. If it's a compromise situation, whether it's a resource or a cost, you need to look at the total impact and the trade-offs. What is it you're going to give in to accept this resource addition or this cost addition? Or if you want to save costs and resources, you need to figure out what do you give in. Are you going to give in to time? Are you going to change scope? Or is quality going to be a trade-off? So you need to figure out where you're going to do that cost saving or resource saving. I hope I answered that question properly.
I think pretty good you have answered. The next question is that how do you manage scope?
Okay, that I would say is probably another hour's
Ah,
discussion because it's a very broad thing.
sure.
Clearly, communication and documentation. You need to really say what as much as you can document. Example of the building. If you don't have a architectural drawing, if you don't have wiring diagram, if you don't have a pipeline diagram, if you don't have a project plan, if you don't have a resource plan, you are not clear in your scope. If you have a 3D rendering of your building, if you have material samples taken, the more you can show visually, the more you can we have proof for your scope, the better your scope management will be. Less it is defined badly if it's defined, if it's not clear, if people, your resource A and B are having two different understandings about your scope, that means your scope is not clear. So make it as clear as possible, have much as possible clarity on your scope. The more you do that, the better. There's never you can say that scope is defined too much. There's no too much when it comes to scope definition. So define your scope as much as possible. Bring in examples, bring in documentation, bring in deliverables, bring in checklists. The more you do that, you manage the scope, the better.
Great. So let me share one more question. So it says how project quality can correspond with the plan of project.
Yeah, so that's where I said quality again is very subjective. You need to define what you mean by your project quality, because in software engineering, project quality is different to construction, to event management, to entertainment, to whatever industry. So first you need to define what you mean by quality. And next thing you need to look at is, okay, to meet that quality, what compromise is required? Because as I said, the triple constraints are the main things. If you try to touch upon any of them, reduce or change anything, time, cost, or scope, your quality is going to have an impact. You cannot improve your quality by reducing any of those things. Same way, you can have the biggest cost, the longest time, and the biggest scope, and have the best quality. But in practically, it's not going to work. You can't take things forever. You can't build a pyramid like they used to do for years today. People are changing, the requirements are, everything is needed yesterday, not tomorrow. So with those time constraints and low budgets and defined scopes, quality sometimes need to be compromised, but it should not be compromised in a way that the overall objective is not achieved. You need to make sure your overall objective is achieved with the right quality, right time, right cost, and the right scope.
Let me share one more interesting question with you, so that, and I think with that question we will be winding up, because we have a lot of questions pending, but yes, we have limited time as well.
Yeah.
So let's have one more interesting question, which says, how do we overcome the lack of trust challenges?
Very, very interesting, very important question. All questions were important.
Yeah.
Lack of trust, as I said, it is clearly a communication gap. And this is not only in project management, this is even in relationships. If you don't communicate, if you're not transparent, if you're not open, that is the first issue for trust. Most of the time, trust is because of misunderstanding or assumption. If you have proper protocols and you communicate, and the moment you have a trust issue, if you openly Without you as individuals, the moment you can keep your emotions away and you can have rational thinking, trust is always a better thing. If you put your emotions first, that is where you get hurt. And that's where trust really is a problem. So if you can think like an AI and keep your emotions away and do not label your emotions and take whatever the impeding fact, if you look at whatever the misunderstanding, first objective and empathize from the other person's view. Why did this happen? Or why would he or she said this? Or why did this not happen? Then you will start thinking rationally. Then all you need to do is openly communicate with that person without the emotions and say, Priyadarshini, this thing happened with you during the project. You can even be open and say, I'm a bit upset about it, but I'm sure there's a rationale from your side. I just want to hear your side of the story. Transparency is the most important thing. If you can do that, it's not a project management lesson, it's a lesson in life. All these problems you see in the world can be just, it can vanish overnight if we keep our assumptions, emotions away, and we take things rationally and we start talking with people face to face, whether it's virtual or real world. Most of the trust issues can be sorted. But there are games and things that you can do, but it's a different discussion altogether. I think I gave some examples. Maybe you can go through that. That can help you.
And there are a lot of thank you messages for you, and I really wanted to read all of them, but yes, it's because we have limited time. So I just wanted to combine and share. Thank you so much for helping us learn a lot. And we actually, most of the people have asked for another webinar. So I think we will have to meet again for it. And I think we'll have to talk more because some of the valuable questions are still yet to be answered. But thank you so much for today.
My pleasure. Pleasure is mine. I thank Uni Athena and you, Pedashini, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you for the 500 plus participants who are here, because it's one of the greatest webinars I've seen because of the attendance and the interactivity is very high. So it's my pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm approachable on social media. If somebody wants to ask any questions, if I can, I'll try to help you out. And let's see if Uni Athena has another slot. Maybe I might be able to connect, maybe in an extension or a different topic. So let's see if it goes.
Thank you so much. It's really very generous of you to share that.
Thank
pleasure. You so much, everyone. Please feel connected, and we will be sharing a lot of information. And thank you so much, Mr. Isasi, for joining us. And I think you can take a little rest now, which is required. But thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. And thank you, everyone. Have a good day, and wish you a happy new year or whatever the festivals you're celebrating. Wish all of you the success, and take care. Thank you.
So that was Mr. Yasa sharing all his valuable expertise on project management. Now let's talk about Uni Athena. We have been sharing a lot of webinars, like arranging a lot of webinars for all of you, and that will keep on happening. So let me share some more insights about Uni Athena, which is helping all of you to get affordable, flexible, and accessible education. Now, how do we do that? Let me share one by one with you. So before I give all the information about the courses, let me share that we currently have 2 lakhs plus learners with us who are getting benefit, and we are helping them from 200 and plus countries, and we have offered them 400 and plus courses, which you can actually access from our sites, which are accredited from the designated, well-known universities, which you can say like UCAM University, GMU, and a lot more. Now we have master's courses, we have MEA courses, MBA courses, we have micro-credit courses, and we have doctorate courses as well. Yes, you heard it right, doctorate courses as well. We have some short courses for free learning, in which you can get the learning free of cost, and you can do it as your pace, on your own pace. We have some basics, essentials, mastering, and we have diploma, executive diploma, and MBA essentials, all for your benefits. You can have a look at the site and get the benefit, all the free courses as well. Now we have our courses designed in a way that it gets help you to give the flexible payment. Now, what do I mean by that is you can actually pay for one module at a time and then move on, and you pay for the next module when you start it. So this is how you get the flexibility of the payments. We have 100% online course, so you don't have to be worried about traveling or doing anything else. So all the things will be available to you. It is self-paced. That means you can do it on your own. So let's say that you're so busy. So maybe you could not do it today. So tomorrow is your day. So you can do it as your pace. The next is about the creditability. As I shared that our courses are trusted and accredited from many universities which are accredited. And you can have a look at our site also for more information. We have modular courses. That means the courses are actually not bombarded you in one of the lessons or something. They are divided in modular courses, and they will be helping you to get the knowledge in bits and bits so that you can understand the topic in a deeper and clearer way. You also have personal tutor connect. Now, what do I mean by that? You must be thinking that the course is online, so nobody is going to help me out. But no, there is nothing like that. We will have some personal tutors to help you out to get the personal connect with Uni Athena, so that if you face any problem with us, you will be helped by your personal tutor. You will be provided with the right guidance at the right time. Then we have 100%, which is already been shared. This is 100% online, which you can get benefit of. What I mean by this, that you get the videos of the lectures to watch, from which you can understand. Like, you must have understood that Mr. Yasas helped us in today's webinar a lot, right? So we have some experts, lecturers who are going to share their knowledge in the videos in the course that you choose. Then we have reading materials, because we know that the reading of the material is also going to help a lot of learners. Not all the learners are will be helping with the videos only, but they request, but they want some reading materials as well. We have reading materials as well, so that you can have the reading materials for the same. Then we have some references attached to it, so that you can just have a look at the references taken for the videos and essential readings. And we have some additional resources also, because we at Uni Athena feel that the sky is the limit of learning. And that's why we try to give you a lot of opportunity to learn about each and every concept and the topics that we have at in the courses. Now you must be wondering that where should I go for taking admission and everything. So first of all, go through our site called www.uniathena.com, where you will get all the information about all the courses, being academic courses or short courses. You will get all the information related to fees, duration, and whatnot. Also, if you want to specifically go to the admissions and you want to you want the help for the courses, you can actually write a mail to admissions@uniathena.com or fatima@uniathena.com. You will be helped for the admissions and getting some advices for the same. You can also see that we have our presence offline in United Kingdom, India, and Middle East, for which the information also can be fetched from the site. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Keep on joining the other webinars also. I'm sure you will be helped with all the contents that we help you out with. Thank you so much for joining.